right. Welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today we have Ian. Is it Dunican? Did I say that? I butchered the shit out of that to start this podcast, I'm sure.
That's all right, James. That's fine. You can go along with your racist comments to me. That's okay.
I have friends,
Well,
okay? It's all
I
good.
get called all sorts. A lady said to me last week while I was talking to her, "Are you Serbian?" I was like, "How the fuck am I Serbian? Do you It sounds Serbian, Yugoslavian." I said, "Do I sound Serbian or Yugoslavian to you?" It's like, really? I said, I actually probably have more respect for you. He said I was Japanese. Like completely off the ball there.
Oh,
So yeah, Dunican. So in the Irish language, the DUN
I
is
think I
pronounced
got
like
it
a
right.
DOON, like a dune. So
Okay,
that's yeah,
almost.
comes from the Irish word of
Gotcha.
Donegal.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. No, all good. But people who are not aware of your background, Ian, obviously you excel in the area of sleep around athletes and things. Do you want to maybe just dive into a little bit of your background there and where you've come from?
Yeah, so I suppose as you can probably tell by my accent or accident, I'm Irish originally. I've been in Western Australia for a little over 20 years now. My background's a bit mixed and colourful. I dropped out of school in probably the equivalent of year 12 or the last year of high school to join the military. I did 5 years in an infantry unit, served overseas as well, in the Middle East. Got sick of that, decided to go back to university, came here to Western Australia with my wife, who's Australian. She's from around Melbourne, Victoria. We came here and I did an undergraduate degree in education and an associate's degree in health and safety. I worked in the mining industry for about 10 years, health and safety
Oh
and
wow.
business improvement roles. And in my last role in that mining company was like a global advisor for fatigue and human performance. So I kind of married up this kind of improvement area and my health and safety knowledge as well. I did a postgrad in engineering, did a master's in mine engineering, I did a master's in business as well. I did a graduate certificate in sleep science. And then I decided that I wanted to go and do something different, or kind of go deeper into that. So in 2014, I went back to do my PhD in sleep and performance with elite combat and contact athletes. So primarily working with the
Oh
Western
nice.
Force and Super Rugby, and then also with the Australian Institute of
Yep.
Sport with some judo and boxing athletes and grappling. In 2017, I started up my own business called Melia's Consulting. We have another arm of that business, Sleep for Performance, where we have a podcast, we do seminars and so on. It's kind of like an educational arm. So we have two kind of, I suppose, arms to the business of Melia's Consulting. One is we work a lot with industry, lots of mining, oil and gas, rail, transportation. We even work in entertainment, aviation. We help them with the designing of fatigue risk management systems and shifts in roster design and sleep and all these type of things around safety. And then the other side is we work with athletes as well. So we've worked with a number of different athletes. We've interfaced with Jordan at the fight dietitian. We work with the McLaren Formula One team. We do all their travel and jet lag
Oh
planning
wow.
for McLaren. I've worked one on one with Daniel Ricciardo before, and a other range of athletes. I think probably the final part then is in the business, all of us are a bunch of nerds really. We all do different types of research. So I do anything from dream research and nightmares right through to research in athletes to shift work and sleep environment. And yeah, that's where I am today. So I still research. I have an adjunct senior research fellow position, which is a fancy way of saying I don't get paid, but I get to do research. So it's like a professor position at the University of Western Australia, which is one of the top universities here in Australia, probably in the akin to an Ivy League school in America. And in conjunction with that, I've got a background in ultramarathon, so I've ran a number of like long distance runs, 100k runs, 100-mile runs, Leadville 100 miler at altitude in Colorado. I've done twice. I swam to
Wow.
Rottnest Island, which is a 20k ocean swim, unsupported. I've done that as well. Well, sorry, unsupported by like fins and wetsuits and so on. And I've got a background in combat sports. I have a black belt in jiu-jitsu, although I'm a middle-aged shitty athlete, and I played rugby growing up as well. And yeah, I probably have ADHD as well.
I was gonna say you sound a bit crazy at the end of this. That's awesome. That's a big background of a range of
Yeah,
things and a lot of stuff we can dive into too. Yeah, that's great. But obviously you mentioned about the dream research and nightmare research.
yeah.
Obviously you mentioned that before the podcast. That sounds very interesting. So what kind of things are you looking at within that? Does any of that relate to performance?
I suppose indirectly I may do. I also host another podcast called, I have my own podcast, Sleep for Performance, but I also have another podcast I do with a co host in Ireland called Learning to Die, which is a podcast around philosophy, psychology, history, and
Learning to die.
learning to die. Yeah, learning to die.
Oh,
Yeah,
sounds grim.
yeah, we've had some really interesting philosophers on that. It's actually it's the other way around. It's actually life affirming. It's about grabbing life by the balls and actually going and doing something instead of sitting around being terrified. And it was a number of guests on this podcast actually led me to combine this research in this area. So we've seen during the pandemic and over the last few years that nightmares are increasing, and with nightmares as well, we see a lot of people having death anxiety. This was probably accelerated by COVID. I was talking about a little bit before, and so there's people like between 18 to 25 who are actually terrified to leave the house, James, because they're afraid they're going to get sick and die. They're afraid a car's going to
Yeah,
hit them.
I've seen some of
Someone's
that.
going to rob them. It's this kind of like just hide away. Jonathan Haidt spoke about it in the Cognitive of the American Mind. Jordan Peterson talks about it, and so on. And we found a very high prevalence of nightmares and the relationship between death anxiety already in our research. And we're still collecting this. So if people want to jump on this, it's open to anybody. Dreamteam.study is our website, and people can go and participate in that as well. But I think indirectly, it's going to allow people, from a performance point of view, to start living their lives. Is what I'd say for some people. We can maybe use this data to start making some meaningful actions to reduce nightmares. And the other thing from a sleep perspective is we know that one of the easiest indicators of sleep quality is nightmares. So if I asked you, James, do you dream a lot? And if you said to me, yeah, I
Nope.
dream a lot, and it's really good. Yeah, I enjoy my dreams. That's a good sign of sleep quality. If you don't dream or you have lots of nightmares, it's a quick way of kind of saying you've got poor sleep quality. So it's kind of a quick kind of indicator of what's happening with your sleep. Yeah.
So someone who doesn't dream, like I don't. At least I don't remember any of my dreams. So I'm assuming I don't dream. Then does that mean my sleep quality could be better if I was trying to get to a point where I was dreaming?
Yeah, so you may be dreaming but not remembering them. And for some people, even we'd have to look at what you're doing. A lot of people jump out of bed straight away in the morning when the alarm goes off, and they don't give themselves a chance to kind of what I would call wake up slow and just maybe sit there and contemplate what happened overnight for a couple of moments. And for some people, that's just really easy and nice. And then people go, oh, wow, I'm actually starting to remember my dreams. But most of us are running 100 miles an hour every day, jump out of bed, get shit done, go to bed. Like, it's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So,
that's me right now.
yeah. And I won't lie, I'm in that same position at the moment as well. you know, and so this will be a challenge for people. So I would urge people who can't remember their dreams, is don't jump out of bed. Maybe give yourself an extra 5 minutes when the alarm goes off and just lie there and just, chew the fat for a minute and scratch yourself and look out the window and just let your mind wander for a moment and see if you can start recalling your dreams as well. And the other thing as well we've seen is people actively going to bed going, tonight I'm going to remember my dream in the morning. That kind of affirmation it actually helps as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, for some people, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, my wife dreams a lot in her dreams, and I know she has pretty poor sleep. So, but she dreams some, I guess, more nightmare stuff. So,
Yeah, well, that can be
yeah,
an indication of poor sleep quality as well with the more nightmares. So, and they could be driven from a number of different factors. Yeah, and the other thing I'd say to people as well
yeah,
who are like, "Oh, what does this dream mean? And what does that dream mean?" We actually don't know. Like, you would go onto the internet and you'd be like, "I dreamt of I was, walking a pig to school with a lead," and there'd be like
yeah,
20 different interpretations. There's no consensus on that from a scientific perspective. A lot of these websites are just kind of novel things where, someone in
yeah.
the psychic world will say that's what it means, but it can mean completely different things. So I wouldn't stress out about the content. The content of the dream is informed by what we have during the day. Could be informed from what we have from the past, but then also as well the other area as well, which is a bit more sketchy, is that it actually might be a prediction of the future. And we've seen this as well throughout history, is that
Wait,
many dreams have been predictors of the future. So many famous people.
dude, what? Go into this. This is I love this shit, man. This is.
Okay,
I mean,
so
it's a little off topic from my performance thing, but I like
I've
this.
written an essay on my website called Dreams, Death, and Divinity. If people want to read it, it's about 3,000 words. So you can go over and read that. It's under the blog section on the website. But you look at someone like, there was a mathematician, like never, his name was Ramajan, and I made a movie about him called The Man Who Knew Infinity, which I think Dev Patel is his name, the actor that played him. It's a true story. A guy in the early 1900s from India with no formal education became like one of the world's best mathematicians in Cambridge and got a PhD. When he was asked where he got all this mathematical knowledge from, he said that God brought it to him at night time in a dream. So when he went to sleep, he saw basically a version of the God Vishnu would come to him and give him mathematical formulas. This is a man that had no formal education. So where the fuck does that come out of,
Damn.
right? That's first of all, right? That's one, right? The other one then is Rene Descartes, a famous French philosopher, who's actually credited with bringing, modern science to us today in its form with using data. So before, science was very kind of philosophical based. We'd sit around and pontificate. I think when I chew food, it releases a vapor and makes me sleep. Right? That's what people would sit around and say. It was these kind of things. But Descartes had a dream. He actually was visited from an angel in a dream. That the angel said to him, the way like of the future is to use quantification of science. That's why today we use numbers. So he started this, but that came from a dream, right? And we're very quick in
Dude.
society to say, oh, religion is shit and God is this and it's all just bullshit. But so many of our, so many of the direction of society has been influenced by dreams and what people have dreamt. And there's just two examples.
Damn.
Yeah, there's many more. The other interesting one as well is the relationship between dreams and people are listening to this going, what the fuck is this about? Like we're supposed to be here talking about fighting or combat sports, like or something else. The other one that's interesting as well is the relationship in Christopher Kerr's work, Death is But a Dream, about the relationship or the link between dreams and dying. So many people who are about to die start having very vivid dreams. So they basically kind of use a time
Whoa.
marker and they reverse back from when they die and they collect all this data. So as they're going towards the death process into palliative care and so on, so they maybe have 6 weeks to live, they start entering into these different studies. And so many people, when they're about to die, start having more dreams, more vividness of the dreams, and then start having more daytime hallucinations or seeing more visions during the day. This is people sitting
Oh.
in a room, not affected by medication or that's making them hallucinate, but someone that's dying and basically would be sitting in the room talking to the doctor and go, my grandfather that died in 1930 is sitting here and he's telling me I'm coming soon and everything's fine. And this is people with no mental
Damn.
illness, right? And this has been well documented and published in palliative care journals as well. Death is but a dream. And as people get more towards dying, the frequency of those dreams and those dreams goes up, less nightmares happen, and the more comforting it becomes as well. So people are ready to pass over. This is really interesting also. The other thing as well on this subject is William James, the founder of modern psychology, back in the 1800s and early 1900s, himself and other people, they started up the field of psychology. Psychology was really about psychical research at the start. Many people don't know this. A big chunk of psychology over 100 years ago was about contacting the dead and the purpose of death and where will we go. So it was very kind of esoteric and spiritual. And over the years, it's just been basically hijacked. So there was a guy that was born in the West Indies of English and Irish background, Barrett, I think it was his name. He ended up becoming a professor of physics in Dublin. He wrote a book called Deathbed Visions, which spanned these accounts from like the late 1800s into the 1900s. It was published in 1926, I believe. Deathbed Visions, and this is has numerous accounts in this of people reporting seeing people who've died, then they've died. It's just all this whole thing about deathbed visions and the relationship. And we see this as well in other cultures. Tibetan culture has this as well in terms of Buddhism and so on. There's a big relationship between death and dreams. So this is another area that's quite interesting as well. And maybe
Wow.
maybe this dreaming process and this sleep process might be a bridge to another world. Who knows? So we got like
Yeah.
past.
Does this make you believe more in, say, like an afterlife or spiritual realm and things like that?
I've come to the conclusion, James, that this isn't it. I think this is. I think, for want of a better word, if I put it in very scientific terms, I think this is all bullshit here. Yeah,
Damn.
I've also participated in some. I would wax and wane in meditation. I would say I've been on silent
Yeah.
meditation retreats. I would. I have a very. I have a soft spot for Eastern philosophy and Buddhism and Taoism. I'm more drawn towards that than the Christianity. Um, but I would say that I think there's something more, yeah. And I think the relationship with dreams and dying needs to be explored a bit more. And I think there's more to it. There's also as well lots of. I spoke to a guy. Actually, his book came yesterday called Authorized Lives. He's what's called a tulku. Have you ever heard of a tulku? Tulku.
No.
Tulku was a reincarnation of a Tibetan, like Buddhist master or spiritual guidance person. And this guy Eli was basically a tulku, a reincarnation, but he grew up in America. So he was like a Western version of this reincarnation. But many of these people, these tulkus, actually have dreams when they're young of past lives. and then they start seeing things and describing things and painting pictures of places in Tibet or Nepal or India where they've never been to at the age of 4 in places like San Francisco. So
Damn.
this links back to another thing called Hindra's net. Hindra's net comes out of Buddhism and Hinduism, that the world is kind of covered by a net, which is nearly like an invisible internet where our consciousness goes up into, and it's like a collective consciousness. Carl Jung spoke about
Like a simulation.
yeah, well, kind of maybe like a simulation. Carl Jung spoke about this. Rupert Sheldrake talks about this in morphic resonance theory. Other people speak about this. So maybe it's a way we, upload stuff and download stuff. A classic example I always say is like, look at the 4 minute mile. Nobody could break it. Nobody could break it. Roger Bannister breaks it. 20 or 30 people break the 4 minute mile. Exactly. So how the fuck does that happen? Nothing's changed. Like, we haven't adapted physiologically. But how is that consciousness going up and down straight away? Or a fighter who's unbeaten. He gets beaten once. Next minute he goes, oh yeah, I can beat him then. It's like this weird kind of thing that happens. Or in our own lives, we go, oh, I could never do this. I could never do that. And then you just do something. Like, I know one guy at the moment, he's probably 51. I could never go to uni. I could never go to uni. I could never do that. He went to uni, got on like the dean's list, like in the first semester. So now he's like, boom, I can do anything. It's just, I don't know. I've got more questions about this than answers, but this is where these are some of the things that are circulating at the moment.
Oh, I love this. I mean, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the show Ancient Aliens. I don't know if you've watched Ancient Aliens.
A few episodes, yeah.
Dude,
I think you have to be high to watch that.
Oh, I was going to say, this sounds like we smoked a bowl and did a podcast and it just turned into a Joe Rogan. But Ancient Aliens, they talk about the same thing, about all the people on there downloading information from the gods, and that's how they created and they have all the things on there. But yeah, I love that show. That show is awesome too.
Yeah.
It's but similar concept,
Yeah.
But yeah, we should move this on to some performance stuff so the people listening aren't like, what the fuck is going on? But let's start with wearables. Wearables and sleep. So all the companies now are jumping on this bandwagon. You've got Aura Ring. I think Whoop might even track your sleep as well. You've got all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously there's potential issues in tracking accuracy, what they actually track, what's actually important for someone to track, and then if is that going to cause any tracking anxiety from the person using it? So what's your take on wearables for sleep? Do you have one that you recommend, or do you recommend not using them, and anything else in between?
Okay, so this is very interesting. I'm just typing here at the moment so I get this title right, because unfortunately I'm actually half an idiot, so I'm going to actually pull up the version of the paper that we just had published. Because
too much dream information.
I went completely off topic there. So myself and a guy called Matt Driller, Shawnee Almond, a bunch of us anyway, a bunch of nerds, right? We actually published a paper, and I can give you this afterwards, and it's open access, so anybody can read this. It's called Pajamas, Polysomnography, and Professional Athletes: The Role of Sleep Tracking in Sport, right? Sleep tracking technology in sport. But before that, I have actually validated some of these technologies in the laboratory as well, and have them published, but I'll send you this afterwards. So overall, before we talk about wearables and the validity of them, we have to probably break this into maybe 3 or 4 chunks. To measure people's sleep, we've got different methodologies. We have one, PSG, at the top of the ladder, right? The gold standard, top of the WASA. This is what you might see people put on these wires onto their head and around their body. That's really focused on investigating sleep disorders, which there's over 70 of those. They can be done in the laboratory, can be done at home. That's not meant to be done longitudinally. So like over time, it's meant to be basically a diagnostic tool overnight. The second bucket then down we go is into the wearables. So what we're talking about, then we go down into more other stuff like nearables, stuff you can put in the room, and then we might go into self-reported diaries and so on. So coming back onto the wearables, they can be further broken down into more clinical grade actigraphy devices that a scientist will give you, and then you've got all these wearables, the Fitbits, the Oura Rings, the Garmins, and so on.
Yeah.
In general, for measuring the time you go to bed and the time you get up, the amount of sleep you've had, they're not too bad. They're somewhere between 80 to 95% accurate, which is actually quite good in measuring those things. For sleep stages, REM sleep, non-REM, light sleep, they're all really bad. There's a load of variation in them. So I would say to you, if you're wearing a wearable, don't look at the sleep stages, just look at the sleep measures. And the second thing I would say is look at them over a period of time. Don't wake up in the morning and freak out and go, oh, I only got like 20 hours sleep yesterday, or 2 hours sleep, or 4 hours sleep. Don't worry about that. Look at the average over a week or a 2-week or a 3-week period. Because sleep does fluctuate, just like people on diets. Some days you want to have a pizza and you want to eat a load of Mars bars. Okay, but you're looking for, on average, across maybe a 2 week period, I'm getting like 2,500 calories a day, whatever it might be. You're looking for that. In terms of recommendations, we don't in the business recommend technologies, but what I would say is that based on the latest research, it would look like, from the latest research has come up by people like Evan Chinoy, who's done stuff like for the military, comparing and contrasting these devices, that the Fitbit algorithm would have the best one for accuracy currently, is what I would say.
Interesting.
Yeah. So in terms of for sleep, the Fitbit would have some of the best and the Garmin would have some of the worst in the latest research. But they're constantly playing with these algorithms and constantly changing around with them. Now, we also spoke in this paper about what you just mentioned, James, is people getting stressed out by them. The scientific term is orthosomnia. So people basically getting obsessed with, I wake up in the morning and only got like 6 hours sleep. Do not stress about that. For some people, the wearables actually makes their sleep worse because they're freaking out about the number.
Yeah.
You cannot action that every single day, right? What you want to do is action it over a period of time. So collect some data for a week or two, and then you can action that data. Because what you can see is things like, oh, look, on Monday night, I go to bed at 9 o'clock. On Tuesday, I go to bed at 10 o'clock. On Wednesday, I go to bed at 8 o'clock. On Thursday night, I go to bed at 12 o'clock. On Friday, I go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. That variation in the time you go to bed is what we call social jet lag. And that's bad, because that's going to lead to like poor sleep behaviors and practices. What we're looking for is consistency. And we find a lot with athletes this happens, particularly those who have to work part-time or full-time, because they're trying to get trained in the evening as well. So it's very difficult. We see a lot of this kind of social jet lag across the week, and then people trying to recover on the weekend as well. But you can use the wearable then devices then to kind of make some changes to your schedule around that.
What are you looking at, or if someone is tracking their sleep? Obviously, you mentioned talking about 1, 2, 3 week averages. What are you looking at within the stages of sleep, or what should someone look at regarding the stages of sleep and the averages in terms of what stages they should be in, I guess, for how long, etc.? Like, is that something that someone should even check and track?
I wouldn't even bother. No.
Okay.
One, because those devices are really poor at doing it, and so they can be out by 200%. But on average, if we look at what we should do from a clinical perspective, we should be looking at about 25% of our night in REM sleep, which is dreaming sleep, at the back end of the night. So that's predominantly where dream and sleep happens. Dream and sleep happens in other stages as well, but predominantly it's in the REM stages, in the REM stages, the REM stage, sorry. Then in the non-REM stages, stage 1, 2, and 3, different things are happening there. So stage 1 is quite light. Stage 2 is a little bit deeper, and stage 3 then is deep sleep. A lot of people say REM sleep is deep sleep. It's not. That's like saying, you know, Mars bars are lettuce. It's just completely opposite, right? Deep sleep is stage 3. This is where growth hormone is released. So this is very important for all the guys out there that are getting on the Joe Rogan podcast and want to do TRT and all this sort of stuff. The first thing you should action is improving your sleep, because testosterone is naturally released overnight if you get enough sleep. So, you know, you see these guys, yeah, well, I'm going to be like Jocko and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, and I'm going to crush today and do all that. All you're doing, mate, is crushing your balls, because you're basically not releasing testosterone because you're getting only about 4 or 5 hours sleep. And then you're getting on the TRT and you have yourself in this negative cycle. So the first thing I'd say to people that want to increase testosterone is look at the amount of sleep that you're getting, because this is the easiest way to do it. It's an endogenous way. It's not an external thing you have to do to increase testosterone naturally. So you got stages 1, 2, and 3, and then REM sleep. Predominantly, the non-REM happens at the first half of the night, and the REM happens at the back. Now, many people have probably heard, oh, this goes in 90-minute cycles, so I should just get 6 hours, and that's perfect. No, it's not. That was a study that said, on average, for thousands of people, it looks like it's happening every 90 minutes. If you've had a bad night's sleep, James, the night before, your cycles might be 60, 45, 90, 120. They're always different. They change night to night, and depending on what happened in the days before, depending on your trend and so on. So this kind of every cycle is 90 minutes is not right. It's inaccurate. If we want to track your sleep cycles correctly, we have to put electrodes on your head. We have to look at EEG in the brain. That is the best way to do it, and the only way to do it. The wearables are using heart rate variability to do that as an inference of an inference, right? So it's not accurate. They're getting better, but they're still not accurate. I would say to people, don't stress about sleep stages. look more about sleep behavior and routine.
I hope you're enjoying the chat so far. Before we get back to that, I just want to let you know that Sweet Science of Fighting is more than just a podcast. We have a full training app with strength conditioning programs for strikers, grapplers, and MMA athletes, so you don't have to think about what you're doing and you're getting access to the latest scientific methods to improve combat sports performance. We have programs specifically for judo, for jiu-jitsu, for wrestling, MMA, boxing, Muay Thai is coming soon. All these things are going to be in the training app. We also have a private community where some of the coaches that have been on the podcast are in there to help you with any training questions and any performance questions you have. For example, Andrew Usher and Casper DeWitt. We also have some online courses within the training app. They cover strength, conditioning, mental skills, and weight cutting. And finally, we now have Ryan Villalobos in the community, a second degree Jiu-Jitsu black belt, who is there to break down any of your grappling matches that you want seen to by a second eye. He's currently breaking down videos on a separate Sweet Science of Fighting YouTube channel, and he will break down your video within the community. So if you have a match or a roll that you just recorded, you can upload that in there and Ryan will break that down for you. So what are you waiting for? Jump down in the description. You can check out the Sweet Science of Fighting Underground. Otherwise, enjoy the podcast.
Yeah.
Interesting. I just had Nick Littlehales on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
Are you aware? Yeah, we're around the sleep cycle, 90-minute sleep cycle.
Yeah.
Having 35 90-minute sleep cycles a week and spacing that however fits your schedule. So you mentioned obviously the 90-minute sleep cycle is probably not accurate for most people because it can vary a lot. So instead of, planning sleep in cycles, how do you recommend, or how much sleep do you recommend someone get, say, at night? Do you still recommend them napping in the day? Are there other rules around that? So is the general 8 hours of sleep what you'd be like, okay, that's probably what you should get? Or is there a lot of individual variance around that? And can someone get away with less and make up for it later?
Lots of questions in that one. Okay, so first,
yeah, sorry,
that's good. It's a good question because people often fire that at me as a big ball of different arms to it, and it's a good question. So on average, for 95% of the population, people need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Right, for most people. Yes, there's individual variances for people, and there's also night-to-night variances for that person. So some nights I might get 7.5, 6, 5, 8, 9, and so on. We have a life. Sometimes we have to get up early, we have to work, we have sleep problems, we wake up a few times, whatever it might be. Completely normal. So it's not, it's completely normal. Less than 1% of the population can get by, let me rephrase this. Less than 1% of the population can sleep less than 6 hours per night and perform well. People can get by on less than 6, but they're getting by. They're just basically existing. Yeah. And we've seen these people at work. We've seen these people in the gym. We've seen these people in our lives, right? We've seen people 35 that look like they're 70. Because they're just absolutely fucked, right? Let's be honest. They're just fucked, right? They got 2 or 3 kids. They're trying to train. They're trying to do work. They're trying to do an MBA. They're just fucked. They just look fucked the whole time, right? So we've seen these people. They're existing, and they'll rub their eyes and say, "I can get by on 5 hours sleep. What's wrong with you?" But we know less than 1% can get by on 6 hours and perform well. Many people will just be on exhaust fumes, and we see this time and time again when we give people sleep opportunities and they increase sleep, how better they feel, and then the impact on their overall health and fitness, and particularly on their diet and nutrition. So I don't know if you've ever spoken about the impact or had anybody talk about the impact of leptin and ghrelin and appetite regulation.
No.
So this is quite
dive into it.
This is quite interesting. So, particularly here in Australia, but also in the Western world, we're seeing obviously an increase in what we call counterweights. People are getting fatter, right? Particularly men. They're developing a counterweight around their gut and they're arching forward. This then leads to obstructive sleep apnea, which is a sleep disorder. So we're just getting fatter and sicker, more metabolic conditions and so on. And coming back on some of my other work, if you look at the value of dying, a report by the Lancet Commission, the Journal of the Lancet, that put together a 50-page report, showed that actually the life expectancy is going backwards. We're actually dying younger. Yeah, there's a few outliers older, but we're actually not living as long as what we did. And that's linked back to diet, nutrition, mental health, and so on, many of these lifestyle factors. So if we can look at diet, nutrition, or for elite athletes or people trying to cut weight or all these type of things, we need to look at sleep. Because if you don't sleep enough, we have this interaction between 2 hormones, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin, think about the G, to grow hunger. If you're sleeping less than 7 hours or 6 hours, or those people doing night shift, you will have an increase in ghrelin. This is why when you're working on a night shift at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not craving a salad or nuts or a muesli bar. You're craving something from the happy clown Ronald McDonald. You want burgers, fries, and shitty food. This is because of ghrelin. Now, if you sleep 8 hours or more a night, or the more you sleep, then you will have an increase in leptin, and this lessens your hunger. So think about the G, the ghrelin, to grow the hunger, and L would be leptin to lessen the hunger. And these studies have been repeated, numerous times in different environments. And so, if people want to look at their body composition, they need to be looking at their sleep as well. I think overall, James, in this podcast, I'm probably going to tell you, it's a bit like BMI. There's only one positive correlation with high BMI that I've seen, but high BMI and low sleep, there's generally no positive benefit from it. So everything here I'm going to spin it in terms of a positive benefit, because we know the negative outcome of lack of sleep, but if we can increase it back up at that 7 to 9 hours, it's cheap and easy wins. I'm not selling anything here. So a lot of people are like, oh, buy this bed, buy this mattress, buy this wearable. My message is routine and focus. It's like Jocko says, and I will agree with Jocko on this, discipline equals freedom. Routine is boring, but fuck me, it's effective.
That's going to make hopefully a great clip from this.
I'll come back to haunt me someday. Yeah.
Yeah. So you obviously mentioned, okay, someone does sleep, I don't know, less than 6 hours, maybe they have a couple of nights in a row. Can you make up that sleep by napping in the day or trying to sleep longer, maybe the next night, etc.?
Yeah, you asked that and didn't really answer that well. There's probably 3 different ways you can sleep. Monophasic, you have like an 8-hour block. Biphasic, you maybe sleep 6 hours overnight and you have a nap in the afternoon, like they do in Latin America or in Spain. It's like the siesta culture. Yep. Then you have polyphasic. Babies, young kids have lots of sleeps across the day. People said Churchill did this during the war. Einstein did this as well. It doesn't really matter. Once they all add up to 7 to 9 hours, it's completely fine. For some people, their schedule allows that. But if you're working in a factory, you're not going to be able to say to your boss, oh, I have to go now for my 40-minute nap because the sleep scientist told me on, James DeLazy and Ian told me on the podcast I got to sleep for 40 minutes. He's going to be like, get back to work. All right? But if you're a professional athlete and you're training in the morning, doing an AM session, and you want to break and you're going back in the evening, well then, having a nap is going to be beneficial. But what I would say, James, is what I see this in a lot of athletes is they kind of succumb to the bullshit of YouTube. Get up early, rise and grind. Particularly if you're a combat sports fighter or a rugby player and you fight or play at nighttime, why are you getting up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning? Sleep in. You need to sleep in and get that sleep. I've seen many people, particularly in combat sports around this, particularly strikers, get up and run. I had one guy say to me, I said to my boxer, I said, why do you get up and run at 6 o'clock in the morning? Because I want to get my road work in. But why wouldn't you sleep? I said, and then maybe do your run before your boxing session. Like Valentina Shevchenko actually does a mono session in one day. She does a big extended training session for 2.5 to 3 hours. That's how she trains instead of doing 2 a day. Why wouldn't you do something like that? No, I want to go and get my road work in because, when other people are sleeping, I'm working. Okay. Why do you do that? I said to him. And this is what he said to me. Well, that's what they did on Rocky. I'm like, Rocky's a fucking movie. It's not real life. And it's interesting.
Rocky's fictional.
Yeah, but it's interesting how people are influenced by that. As if that's like, in the Rocky scene when he, 4 o'clock in the morning starts cracking eggs and drinking them. Like, people are influenced.
Those training montages, man.
They're fucking good, though. And I love them. I do love them. Yeah, I do. I have to say, one of my, I have a lot of Rocky music on my playlist when I run. And it does fire me up. Or when I watch a montage, I'm like, yeah, let's go. But I'm not using that as my sports science or sleep science input. I don't present that in a conference. And now let's look at what Rocky did, a case study. Maybe we'll write it up as a journal article as a case study and try and get it published. I probably will get it published too.
No, definitely give that a go. But you also mentioned about the social jet lag.
Yeah.
And I know I've had questions about this before and I've even experienced it myself, like when I was living in Europe and I had to train late, like 8 p.m. session, finish 9:30, 10ish, or any night session. And after you've been training jiu-jitsu or whatever, you're awake. You get home, you eat, and you're just like wide awake. It's like 10:30, 11. You're like, shit, I got to get up early. I just can't get to sleep. What are some things someone can do in that situation?
Yeah, so you could like what we call a prophylactic nap. You could have a nap in the afternoon if you could, or when you come back from work, that would be helpful as well. You could sleep in the next morning if your schedule would allow it. The other thing you can do is actually just look at your redesigning of your week in terms of training. So like for me, I very rarely train after 7 p.m. because I know
Same.
it's going to impact my sleep so much. So I'll try and go at like 4:30 to one of those earlier sessions. I'd rather get up early and get my workout away. I also back end load my week. I'll train generally on a Friday and a Sunday to get my jiu-jitsu in there. During the week, then I'll do running and weights and swimming, so I can work around with it. Obviously, I'm not a professional athlete or a semi-professional athlete. I'm a recreational middle-aged man on my way to like 92. So, I'm not gonna be worried about those sort of things. For me, it's more about having a laugh with the lads at the gym. But definitely you're going to have to look at those things. Now, if people have incurred sleep loss during the week, which is come back to your initial question, which I seem to be skirting around, you should look to increase or recover that sleep as soon as possible on the weekend. Obviously, it's not ideal. Scheduling, like I said, is best, having a routine and similarity across the week. But if you can't, have a sleep in on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, whatever your day off is. Allow yourself that time to rest and recover. So don't kind of deprive yourself of that, where you're saying, oh, like on Saturday morning, I should be getting up to mow the lawns and do all this. Sleep in for a few extra hours. It will do you good and you will feel better. But more for the professional athletes, if you're training in the evening like that, try to look at changing your schedule where you actually go to bed a bit later and get up later as well. Now, that may be hard if you have what's called a Lark chronotype, where you get up early and go to bed early. So you're kind of shifting your chronotype more into that, what we call owl chronotype, going to bed later and get up later. And to do that, you might want to look at some other novel things around your sleep environment. Block out blinds, block out curtains, even aluminium foil on the window, and would block out light. If you put a bit of water on it and stick it to the window, your house will look like
keep those government rays out.
Keep them chemtrails out. But your house may look like a fucking crack den, but it will keep the light out, right? Don't be worried if the cops come knocking. But it will look like a crack den, but it'll keep the lights out. Using eye masks, earplugs, all these things to try and increase your sleep the next morning will help as well. That's more for the professional athlete that has the ability to kind of change their environment and their schedule.
Yeah, I don't think my wife will want me to tin foil up the windows in the house. That won't go down well. But yeah, you mentioned about routines as well, like having a good go to bed like around the same time. So would you try to set someone's schedule, or have someone set the schedule where they try to go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time all the time, and then if there's variance every now and then, that's okay?
Yeah, ideally you would, and we look at that. We look at those in terms of what we call time onset variance, and that's a measure as well. So the more variance we see, the more challenge that people have with sleep quantity and quality as well.
Gotcha.
So yeah, look, I often say it to people, James, right? Do you have kids, James? Do you have young kids or anything? No?
I have a 6-month-old daughter now.
6-month-old daughter, right? So you're going to come into this zone now where when she gets a little bit older, at 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you want to have a sleep schedule. And so many of us may remember when we were young that we had a bit of a routine before bed. You would have dinner, maybe you would watch a bit of TV or a cartoon or whatever it might be, and then you would go to bed. So your parents might bath you, shower you, whatever. In my case, they used to beat me, but that's okay. Whatever it was. I loved it. It was great. It was the best time of my life. And so you would have this routine before sleep. Then you might get into bed. The lights are turned down. You read a story, relax, go to bed. I love you. Nighttime. Bye. And then everything, right? And you would have that routine for kids. But as adults, we don't do that. We come home from work, we get kids ready, we get dinner, blah, 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 whatever it might be. We pull out a laptop after dinner. We start trying to type to catch up on some emails. Do we generally have a glass of wine or a beer because we think we deserved it? We have the phone going, looking at Instagram, and we have Netflix on the background. So we're getting blasted by just constant interaction and stuff as well. And so this is really bad for us. And many people blame electronic devices, but electronic devices, the literature on that and how it impacts sleep is actually divided. So when people say, oh, electronic devices does this to your sleep, whoa, hold on. There's many papers out there that actually show the opposite. So there's a bit of a narrative.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. A bit of a narrative going on in the media around this. So this is a problem. And a few scientists as well have gone on a crusade. I think it's absolutely bullshit. Based upon the evidence, not upon my opinion. It's a bullshit statement to make based upon the evidence. And I think what we need to do is take a step back and look at what's happening. Because if you go to bed, James, and you're on your phone looking at a cat jumping up and down on YouTube and you're giggling away and then you fall asleep, that may be fine for you. But if I'm on my phone, texting my boss, trying to look at data on an Excel sheet, that's a completely different thing. You're not having any impact to your stress. There's no impact to your cortisol. My stress is going through the roof. I'm getting pissed off, right?
Yeah.
And as cortisol goes up, we can't basically secrete melatonin, which is related to sleep. So that's going to impact my sleep. The other thing as well is people say, oh, electronic devices impact your time to fall asleep. Yeah, but what if you fall asleep, James, in a half an hour from watching YouTube? But it takes me 5 minutes because
Yep.
I'm a champion of falling asleep. But what about if I only sleep
Yeah.
6 hours and you sleep 8 hours? Who's actually slept more? You have, but it took you longer to fall asleep. So we're not looking at it in its entirety. We're just looking at little isolated things, and we're creating scaremongering tactics around this. And the media's got a big part to play in this as well. So I would say to people, these two things, these things around electronic devices is completely divided. But coming back to routine, think about how you would put a kid to bed. That's what we need to do for us as adults. We want routine, because when the routine goes out for kids, they start getting grumpy and irritable, and then they need a nap during the day because they can't regulate it. But as adults, we can sort of override it and push through it and grind through it. Particularly when money comes into play. We know we need to make that money. We need to do these other things.
Yeah.
And we tend to overload ourselves. But I also think this is part of society. We're becoming like crazier and crazier for work. Both parents are working.
Yeah.
There's too much on. We're just fucking constantly fried, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about the screens as well. I mean, even on a Saturday night trying to watch the UFC, I'll bloody fall asleep on the couch with the screen blasting light at
Yeah.
me in a dark room. Doesn't make a difference. I'm just like can't even keep my eyes open.
That's
You know?
that's a great example now, James, of cumulative sleep debt. That's the fact that across the week you're tired and you're just crashing.
Yeah.
That's a classic sign of that people that do that. So people that fall asleep in cinemas, fall asleep maybe at a traffic light, sitting down watching TV. This is what we call excessive daytime sleepiness or excessive sleepiness.
Oh damn.
So
I've been called out.
yeah, this is and many people experience this. Many people experience it. It's not uncommon, and so this will be a problem.
Well, doesn't matter what the time is. I'm talking like 10:30, 11 p.m. past my normal bedtime. So it's like I'm already getting tired. This isn't like 8 p.m. Does that make a difference?
Yeah, but it might be still, because sometimes if you've got good sleep routine and then you come to a period where you have to stay up, this would be like, so if you had good sleep routine and you had to stay up a little bit later, you should be able to override that. But the fact that you're falling straight asleep will be a problem as well. But it's also a good sign because you're in a routine. So it's counterproductive to that. So then when
Yeah.
you do get out of a routine, you can see the impact it's having on your sleep as well. What I would say to
Yeah.
combat that, James, is move here to Australia, because UFC is on at 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. It's gold.
I know. I remember when I was obviously I grew up in New Zealand, and New Zealand you start UFC at 12 p.m. on 12 or 1 p.m. on a Sunday.
it's gold.
It would go through to
Yeah,
about
yeah.
5 p.m. and I was like, that was
Yeah.
that was so
It's
good.
perfect.
Didn't have to worry about cards that were extended, and it's like midnight. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Who the
yeah,
fuck
yeah.
fights at midnight anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah.
I don't know how people do
And,
that.
and you're right. It's a great point. Like, and that's what I would say for people like aspiring athletes. Especially if you have the time. This is getting up early in the morning, because most of these cards are at nighttime, between like 7, 8 p.m. up until midnight or 1 a.m. So there's no point in getting up early in the morning. You're just completely desynchronizing your body for this. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What's your take on melatonin? I know big science podcasts like Huberman and stuff. I'm pretty sure. I think he's poo-pooed melatonin. What's your take on using it, and are there any use cases for it?
So there's two different types of melatonin. You get over-the-counter stuff. Well, it depends where you are. Over-the-counter in Australia generally is like a herbal supplement, so we don't know exactly the milligrams that's in it. In America, you can get it over-the-counter in 3, 5, and 10, I think.
Yep.
The same in Canada. If we want to get those doses like that here in Australia, we have to get a prescription. Depends on the issue with the person. The latest research that we've looked at, reviews, have shown that overall, on balance, melatonin makes no difference. That's what the latest review in the literature has shown. So overall, it makes no difference. And then for some people who may have other issues like ADHD, circadian rhythm disorders, taking it for jet lag, you may be making it worse, depending on the direction of travel, the time of day, when you're taking it, and so on. And so we published a paper on this in a travel consensus review recently for athletes. Very little research, very little efficacy on melatonin in athletes and the benefit for it. I would say if you're taking it, it's a hypnotic, it's not a sleeping tablet, it'll make you a bit sleepy. It's short acting, it'll help you kind of fall asleep. If you're taking it and you like it and you think it's working, do it. But I'd also say to you then as well is maybe miss out for a night and see if the same thing is happening as well. So I think sometimes for people it's a placebo effect. It's just like a routine thing, and they think it's helping them actually fall asleep. But on the balance, the research would say melatonin really, is not beneficial.
I've heard. I don't know if you've come across. I can't remember where I heard this. On another podcast with some scientists about high dose melatonin as you age. like high dose, like I'm talking like 100 plus, I think it was 100 plus milligrams. Usually you're taking like 1 to 5. And I was like, holy shit, is that even possible? And I don't know if they used it for sleep or if they used it for something else. I think it was like high dose, but it wasn't for sleep. It was, I can't remember what it was for. I don't know if you've come across anything like that.
No, I haven't seen that. Yeah.
I'm clutching at straws here with that one that I just can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
It's something to do with high dose melatonin.
I'm not sure.
Maybe I have to try to dig it up.
And the other thing I'd say as well, James, is like, there is a lot of health podcasts around, and I think I applaud people for promoting these issues around health and sleep and so on. But there's many people trying to make a buck off the back of sleep who have never researched sleep, never published a paper, never had any experience in their education. So there is a lot of shit out there as well. So
I saw a clip the other day of a guy that says he gets ahead because he doesn't have 1 day in a day. He has 4 days in a day, and that he splits his day up into 4 sections, and that means he has 4 days. So he gets 4 extra things done in a day than to everyone's 1 day. And I was like, fuck, what's this guy on?
yeah, but also as well, I'd say to people, it's like, it's like that. Some schedule came out there a while ago. Mark Wahlberg, up at 5 a.m. train, 6 a.m. pray,
Yeah.
7 a.m. time with family, pray, gym, pray, break, pray. Like it was all this bed at 7 p.m. prayers. Then he was at a UFC event at 10 o'clock at night in Las Vegas. I'm like, well, he's a fucking liar then, because he should have been in bed 3 hours ago and praying, right? So what I'd say to people is like, don't believe half of this shit that you read or these videos. People are doing it for clicks. The amount of people that come to me and go, but this guy does this and this guy does that and says this. I'm like, have you spent a day or a week with him? It's like when people do those men's health like photo shoots. Oh, that guy's got an 8-pack. He probably had it for about 2 hours. Those guys use weight cutting strategies.
And then Photoshop.
Yeah, Photoshop. Those guys use weight cutting strategies to get to that. They dehydrate. They do the same thing like fighters do. I know one guy that was on the cover of Men's Health or one of those things here in Australia. I think he walks around at 76 or 80 kilos and he was like 66 for the photo shoot for about 20 minutes. Ooh. Right? Yeah. So it's like, come on, guys. Stop believing this shit. It's weird. Like people are just, I think people are a little bit gullible with this stuff as well. So I'd urge people, like with all this sort of health stuff that you're seeing, question it by all means, and the validity of it. Is it really true? And then who's giving you the message as well? Are they trying to sell you something? When people are selling you something on a podcast, I'd be very wary as well. That's why we have no affinity with any product. My podcast gets a sponsor from LMNT, but we don't sell any products related to sleep because I don't want to be accused of pushing a product on the back of what we're saying. So exercise caution, my friends, with that.
Nice. And regarding another question around sleep, about sleep banking, I've heard this term before about potentially if you know you're going to have maybe a night with less sleep, that you can bank your sleep leading up to it. So sleeping more the nights before and sleeping in the day and things like that. Is that something you can do, and how do you go about it if it is?
Yeah, I think many people do this already. This becomes a big debate in the sleep science world as well, at conferences and so on. Sleep banking or sleep optimization. I use the word sleep optimization. Especially we've seen some research in military around this as well. Some of the research I've done in Super Rugby has shown this as well. If you know you're going into a day or a night of poor sleep, less sleep, you're going to travel, you got a game at night, you got a fight, whatever it might be, people generally should focus on optimizing sleep in the days before. We use it for shift work strategy as well. I've used it before ultramarathons as well, trying to get extra sleep leading into it. So definitely sleep optimization or sleep banking, if you want to call it that, will definitely help people override those deleterious effects of sleep loss in that short term. So yeah, it's obviously not recommended the whole time, but it's definitely a good strategy to do leading into it. Yeah.
Is there a general protocol or something you advise of someone how to do it? Is it just sleeping as much as you can, or is it maybe like sleeping a few hours more than what you normally sleep?
I would say to people, maybe just extend it by an hour each day, and that'd be good for the 5 to 6 days beforehand. If it's a really short term, let's say you find out on a Thursday you have to go on a Saturday night somewhere, then you might want to sleep as long as you can on the Friday. Yeah, just give yourself carte blanche to kind of sleep into like maybe 10 or 11 o'clock next morning if you could. But many of us, generally get up. It's very hard for humans to oversleep. Very difficult. The small proportion of people would have hypersomnia, where they're sleeping excessively, or people with depression. But it's also a bit of a misnomer. People say, people with depression sleep more. They probably don't sleep more, but they spend more time in bed.
Hey guys, it's me again. I just want to let you know that I also have Sweet Science of Fighting rash guards and shorts, so you can represent Sweet Science of Fighting on the mats and within competition. We have the classic, just like the shirt I'm wearing, rash guard, Sweet Science of Fighting on the front, and we have the logos on the sleeves, and then X Martial on the back. We also have that in a shorts variation, same thing, with the Sweet Arts of Fighting writing on one leg, and we have the logo on the other. But my personal favorite, this is my personal favorite by far. We have this in black and white, and it is the Taniwha Protector Guardian version of the Sweet Science of Fighting with the logo on the back. This was designed by a Māori designer back in New Zealand, so a bit of my heritage on this jersey. It represents the acknowledgement of battle and war. It also represents strength and stability, and also has the New Zealand silver fin. But even if you're not a Kiwi, cop this. This is an awesome design. It is a custom made design. You will not find it anywhere else. So check that. That'll also be down in the description with a discount code. But back to the podcast. And then around, I guess, sleep strategies. So when weight cutting, we talked about obviously the ghrelin, leptin. Okay, when you sleep less, you become more hungry, etc. But I guess around the weight cut, some fighters might be hungry around these times. Yeah. Do you have any strategies to help maybe improve sleep? Because obviously the hunger can kind of kill. Going to bed hungry isn't very nice. So are there any strategies that you have there? I mean, we've talked about routine and stuff like that, but is there anything extra on top of that?
We did some overnight polysomnography with a couple of UFC fighters recently, and it's pretty interesting because one was kind of a poor sleeper and one was a very good sleeper. And it was also interesting to see that the good sleeper was actually ranked very high in the UFC, and the poor sleeper was not ranked so high. So there may be a relationship there between sleep and performance and so on. In terms of the stuff around the weight cutting in the week, I think if you look at some of the work, we did a study actually at the Australian Institute of Sport with a guy called Reid Reel. I don't know if you know Reid. He works at UFC Shanghai.
No, I don't.
Yeah, so Reid did his PhD in weight cutting and elite combat and contact athletes. He works for UFC Shanghai. He's the director, I think, of something there. He's got some fancy title. Actually, myself and Reid and Andy Galpin are just wrapping up a paper looking at sleep and nutrition in combat sport athletes, where we've just basically found that overall sleep quality is shit in combat sport athletes, and nutritional knowledge is shit in combat sport athletes. That's really like the two-line approach to the paper, right? And we had nearly 1,000 people in the study. But strategies around that, I would urge people to work with a dietitian for weight cutting if they can, because I think too many people are actually looking at calorie deficit as opposed to reduction of fiber, what's in their stomach, and the water loading strategies as well. I think people are trying to cut mass amount of calories in the last week. And if you follow people like Danny Lennon, Jordan Sullivan from the Fight Dietitian,
he's been on the podcast.
Yeah, these guys, they'll on the podcast. Yeah, perfect. Well, they'll tell you about this. It's not about reducing calories in fight week. That's all done sort of weeks -1 to -6. Like for now, we're looking at kind of the gut content and so on. So I think if you work with those guys, you're not going to have those appetite ratings through the roof. In the work that we did as well, simulating a week of a fight camp, when we controlled all those things with Reid, sodium, potassium, like all these other things. Like I'm not a nutritionist or dietitian, so I don't know exactly, but we took blood and urine and so on. Appetite ratings were actually quite stable across the week when it's done correctly. So I would say to people, come back the proper weight cutting strategies. Danny and Jordan have just released a book actually last week on making weight. I've ordered it, so that's coming out. I'd urge people as well, if you can't afford to work with a dietitian, grab some of those resources, listen to those guys and do that. I think the weight cutting thing is just, how people approach it is ridiculous. They're just doing a big calorie deficit, and I think that's what's going to lead to them then going to bed hungry and worrying about it. So I'd say work with a dietitian, in that week to basically help with your sleep. In the work that we did, James, we had this work published as well. We didn't really see a massive difference in sleep across the week in our study. It was quite low sleep overall, but we had a control group and a water loading group, and we didn't really see a big difference in them in terms of sleep. But obviously we didn't simulate a fight week where there's media and other pressures and so on. I know some people actually have this as an issue. And just on that fight week sleep as well, or weight cutting sleep, I'd say to people as well, for athletes during fight week, it can be a bit crazy with media, people around you, and hanger-oners and Klingons and people like up your arse, right? Protect your sleep environment. You see on these UFC countdown shows or blogs or stuff, people in people's rooms playing video games and so on. The athlete should have his own space. Nobody should encroach on that. You want to play video games? Go to one of the cornermen's room and play video games. But the athlete should have his bedroom as a sanctuary, or hers as a sanctuary, where they can go and sleep and relax anytime. Kick them the fuck out of your room. It is not a hangout zone. really. I know people want to hang out and distract themselves, but do it in someone else's room, so you always know you can retreat back to your own room at any time.
Yeah, that's good advice for anyone who has a crew with them
Yeah.
preparing for a fight. But I think I covered all the questions I wanted to ask you, Ian. But where can people find you, listen to your podcast, all of that stuff, so they can see what's going on?
So we got sleepforperformance.com.au. You can go to that website. There's plenty of blogs on there, essays, all the podcasts up there, over 130 something episodes. We have seminars for the last 3 years. People can access all those. Then we got Melia's Consulting, where we work with industry groups. So if people want to use us in industry for consulting, you can come to meliasconsulting.com.au as well. We've got the Learning to Die podcast. If people want to go over there, they can see us talking to different philosophers and other people. We had Rob Wolf on there before. If you know Rob Wolf, he's been on Rogan's podcast. We had Rob on. We had Stephen Blackwood from Ralston College and numerous other people on there as well. And then where else can you find me? We get the dreamteam.study over there as well. So there's numerous different places. If you bang my name into Google, you can find me as well. I'm on Google Scholar if people want to look at my research, ResearchGate, and always happy then if people have any sort of questions to fire them over to me, and then I can do them in an FAQ on a podcast or get back to them nice and easy or point them in the right direction. So yeah.
Perfect. Now I'll link a bunch of those up in the description too for anyone to go check out and see what I think. I'm gonna have to follow your was it the Learn to Die podcast? That's what you called it. I'm gonna have to follow that one. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, learning to Die podcast. Yeah, it is quite interesting. We had actually a lady on there who works with the BBC, and we spoke about Islam, the Islamic religion. It was quite interesting. I think over 30,000 views, that one. So it was quite interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, some interesting comments in there as well. That was good. We had Gordon Marino on as well, who's I think he knows Mike Tyson. He wrote a book on existential philosophy. He's a recently retired professor from St. Olaf up in Minnesota. We've had Rob Wolf on, like I said. And then myself and my co-host have often broken down topics like, a Book of Five Rings. We've looked at nuclear war. We had Sonny Brown on. Do you know Sonny Brown from the Sonny Brown Breakdown?
Yes.
Yeah, we had Sonny Brown on talking about MMA. So if people don't know Sonny Brown, Sonny was on. I know Sonny actually was in one of our studies years ago. That's why I met Sonny. Sonny actually was a pretty decent MMA fighter. If memory serves me right, he beat Dan Hooker, I think, in his early career.
Really?
I think so.
Okay.
I think Sonny fought Dan Hooker at lightweight and beat him many moons ago. Yeah, back in maybe AFC or one of these type of things. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. I'm following the podcast, so I'm gonna have to give this some of these. Awesome.
Yeah.
No, but thanks for coming on, Ian. I really appreciate you coming and chatting and sharing all that knowledge.
No worries. If anybody's got any spare cash and you want to send it to me, just put in an envelope and send it.